Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul. Hopefully you're having an amazing day. With AMD and Nvidia both set to unleash their next generation of hardware later this year, there's tons of excitement of course, but also tons of concern. Will we see exactly the same situation play out all over again? Hardware shortages and scalpers rejoicing? Well, the answer is, at least right now, probably not. RTX 30 and RDNA 2 availability are up significantly thanks to, of course, let's say miners moving away from Ethereum mining, plus also general availability from hardware manufacturing going up as well. But next generation of hardware from AMD and Nvidia pretty much all use TSMC's 5nm process. And there's some really good news on this front as well, at least according to a report over at My Drivers. I'd like to give courtesy credit to Hardware Times though. We will be seeing a 25% increase in 5nm wafer production per month, of course. This means that we're going to see TSMC produce 150,000 wafers up from 120,000 wafers. Now, bear in mind, I'm sure most of you know this anyway, but the 5nm process from TSMC will be responsible for RTX 40 from Lovelace, Zen 4, as well as RDNA 3 from AMD. And even Intel, for its first generation of Alchemist GPUs, they're not being produced on the 5nm process, but the 6nm process. So basically, pretty much everyone at this point has a finger in TSMC's pie. Now, to my understanding, speaking to multiple sources, and others in the industry have reported much the same thing, AMD and Nvidia have already been lining TSMC's pockets to basically guarantee a set allocation of wafers per month, because ultimately they can't just kind of wing it, because obviously everyone wants to have their hardware produced via TSMC. And it's going to be a very interesting situation in particular because of yet another report. Business Korea are insinuating that, well, Nvidia have basically had enough of Samsung, and have pretty much, I suppose the best way of describing it is, yeah, we're breaking up with you. And now TSMC will be monopolizing all orders from Nvidia from 2022. So this is kind of for multiple reasons. One of them, of course, is that Samsung's manufacturing process have just simply fallen behind that of TSMC's. I'm sure that, you know, Samsung will continue to put R&D cash and try to improve, but that's the situation at the moment. And also the yields of Samsung's processors haven't exactly been the best. Speaking to some people even a while ago, I can pretty much agree with what Business Korea are reporting here. One of the reasons that Samsung actually were used for RTX 30 is because, well, basically Nvidia were getting manufacturing done at a cheaper rate. Unfortunately, with the shortages, just ended up biting Nvidia in the ass to a degree, and obviously it had other ramifications too, just in terms of things like, for example, the clock frequency of the GPU. Imagine if we had seen TSMC's 7nm process being used for amperes, you know, like, let's say an RTX 3080. I think it would have been a very interesting situation. Either way, I'm going to be really curious because the next generation of cards is going to be up to 600 watts plus. In fact, Igor, over at Igor's lab, has done a really nice breakdown actually of the power consumption for the next generation. You can see it on screen right now. I'll of course link his website in the video description. Basically, the TGP is said to be around 600 watts, and again, he's done a really nice breakdown here with GPU power being around 450 watts approximately, and then obviously memory and other things also gobble up energy. Now, just to parrot myself for 1 second, I was hearing initially that the power figures for Nvidia were not this high for the 4090, but because of simply the competitiveness of AMD, well, basically Nvidia were just pretty much forced to crank the frequencies up as high as possible. And obviously, as you crank frequencies up, power consumption is also like, yeah, I need more power, dude. So it's going to be very curious because I don't think either AMD or Nvidia are exactly going to be, let's say, sipping on the power juice that next generation. 600 watts though is an awful lot of juice. Let's just be really honest. Like, it pretty much means that your room is going to be getting warmer when it's running, and there's not too much we can do about it. Even Nave 31, that's still going to be like 450-ish watts, maybe a little lower. So again, it's a lot more power consumption than what we've seen with you know, generations prior. I'd also like to quickly go over a very interesting patent which has been discovered by Cardiac. Hopefully I've pronounced that correctly. If not, I really apologize, but I will of course link their Twitter account in the video description. And this is a very interesting patent from AMD. Long story short, we are looking at some significant differences in the underlying architecture of one of their future processors. Now, this could be for Zen 4, or it could be something different such as Zen 5. But basically, and you can see in the patent itself, that we now have multiple clusters of both fetch and decode units on the CPU. Fetch, decode, and execute, basically, is of course the very simplistic CPU cycle. So when you're fetching instructions, obviously it's getting whatever instruction from memory, and then basically once it's in memory, once it's within the CPU itself, then it needs to be decoded, and then once the instruction basically can be understood and the CPU essentially knows what it has to do with that instruction. Let's say it reads the instruction, it's like, okay, I need you to add 1 plus 1. Obviously this is very simplified. It can then send that particular instruction to the relevant section of the CPU to kind of do its thing. I will put a link to the patent as well in the video description. Honestly, I'm uncertain whether this is part and parcel of Zen 4 or whether it could be a future architecture. You can see the date as well on the patent itself. Now, I have recently put out an exclusive concerning Zen 4, and I have been hearing numerous improvements to the Zen 4 architecture, and I wasn't told about this one specifically. So possibly this is for Zen 5, or perhaps it is for Zen 4. After all, it's not like I know all of the details yet, but it's going to be absolutely fascinating to see what happens with tech over the next couple of years. I suspect that all of the companies are going to be just absolutely going crazy to outdo one another. And again, it's not just that AMD and Intel are trying to outcompete themselves, well, one another, excuse me, but there's also other concerns both companies have. For example, Apple's M1 and other silicon such as ARM. So there are a lot of competing architectures and a lot of moving parts at the moment in the marketplace. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the shape of, for example, x86 is in just, let's say, 5 years' time. With all of that said, thank you very much for checking out the video. No camera today because I am finishing a few projects, but normal service shall resume shortly. With that said, thank you very much. Take care of yourselves. Have an amazing day. Bye for now.